All right, back from the break. Hopefully you rested, you stretched a little bit, and are ready for this more practical second half of the lecture. In the second half, we will talk about supply chains in China specifically. I especially want to talk about this one-day delivery that was in the title of my presentation, because I really think it's something that shows how far logistics have really gone in Shanghai and China. And then some conclusions about what supply chain of the future might be now, after reflecting a little bit on what China is doing and how. So supply chain in China, I think it's not a surprise to anyone when I say China is the factory of the world, right? 28% of all manufacturing for the whole world is happening in China, and that's like almost a third. You can see how that is quite significant, all coming from one country, even though it is a large country, 1/7 of the world population lives there, but still, it's quite significant in size. And China is increasingly becoming a big consumer in the world as well. When it comes to GDP, which measures expenditure, but also it measures consumption and output, China's GDP is 17.39%. So, and rising, right, as a percentage of the global GDP. So that tells you that not only is China making for the world, but China is making for itself, and increasingly world is making for China more and more. So we now have quite a difficult logistics situation of China needing to sell and buy quite a lot of goods at quite a big volume, which is a significant percentage of GDP of the world. There's no easy way to do that. Additional issue is manufacturing is, of course, focused in hubs. That makes sense. Economies in the whole world kind of naturally form in clusters. But on top of that, Chinese government designated certain zones as manufacturing zones and gave subsidies or lower taxes or things like that, kind of incentives for people to open companies there. And what that has resulted in is these kind of like production hubs, where all these different companies who are making similar kind of products are next to each other. That has all sorts of benefits, right? You can enjoy economies of scale, external economies of scale in this case, from having all these other companies. You can get their workers if you need them, which come pre-trained because the other company trained them. You can maybe have some universities nearby or schools training workers for your kind of company, which is all very useful. You can also benefit from the transportation, right? Like it's hub already by itself. And we said hubs and corridors are the backbone of supply chain management. So that is all well, but the consumers are not in those hubs. Production hubs are production hubs. Consumers are widespread. And it's a problem, especially when they are in remote areas, which are mostly rural areas. And as you can see, almost 40% of China's population, I think it's like 39.6%, is rural. And that means that they live in less accessible parts of China. And China is large. If you've never seen it on a globe, pause this video, go and take a look. It is basically the size of all of Europe, right? And so you have a very complex problem. All the manufacturing is done in a few points, but the consumption is happening everywhere else. And so how do you distribute that while at the same time selling to other countries and buying from them and distributing these products? So that's a question, how to service these diverse needs of very diverse consumers, because not everyone wants the same kind of goods, right? Some kind of consumers would prefer medicines, whereas others would like diapers, depending on if they have elderly or babies at home. So you have to make sure that the right kind of products are available everywhere, right? No easy feat. Well, technology makes it a lot easier than it used to be. And those of you who maybe also live in remote areas can tell this. The variety of products you have now available to you is much bigger than the variety of products you used to have even as recent as 10 years ago, or even 5 in some places, because of e-commerce and supply chain management. So this is what I invite you to imagine. Imagine a small shop in a village. Village maybe has only 100 people and it's a mountain, so people live far from each other as well. They are maybe in animal husbandry and they all have cattle, so they need a lot of space. the one place that they would at times gather is that one local shop. They would come there for all sorts of things, knickknacks like food or some agricultural tools. That shop would be selling everything. But the amount of products that small shop can hold is not very big. The market is only 100 people, and so it doesn't make sense to buy diverse range of products. You just sell what will definitely sell, and that is the only offering in your shop. Well, a couple of years ago, exactly to those kinds of shops, these e-commerce giants came knocking and said, listen, how about we teach you how to order things from our platform for your consumers, and your consumers can, through you, buy anything from our platform. And these e-commerce giants, they're selling anything, right? We're talking from, the smallest knickknacks like toys or something to literally Tesla Model X or something like that, like supercars. So suddenly, this small shop that's maybe, 2 meters squared can hold the capacity of a mega market, the largest shop you've ever seen. Because if a customer comes and places an order, once a week from a larger town, this e-commerce platform will send a truck with all the things that were ordered and deliver them at once. This keeps the costs low, but it makes the offering incredibly vast. And this is what I already mentioned in the other clip as well. If you watched it, if you didn't, go and watch it. The bottom of the pyramid. These are the people who are kind of the least served because they have the least means. They have the least monetary power and purchasing power. But combined, they make a big percentage of any population. And they are a quite lucrative market if you know how to serve it. So when you're telling them the only thing you can buy is rice, they will buy some. But when you tell them you can buy anything and it's cheap, it's affordable, and many useful things like very cheap computers, for example. And so once you start offering something like that from each of these small shops, then you are in business of serving a large country with very diverse products. So this is exactly what happened a couple of years ago. Actually, this year there was like a promotional campaign by Alibaba where they showed some small village in Tibet, first time getting their deliveries from e-commerce websites. And they were recording these people and they were like, oh yeah, I can buy these jackets that I saw online, and I can buy these snacks that are not available in my region usually. And you can see that they're thrilled about it. And it's small, it's simple things, but it's very important to them, right? As I said before, access to goods is access to ideas, and access to markets is access to money. So it's mutually beneficial that this is now happening. And this is what is known as online to offline trend. Most of the world is now going offline to online, right? Brick and mortar shops opening e-commerce. But in China, they're already kind of a step ahead. The online shops going into brick and mortar and saying, sell this online product for us. And it's working. It's working quite well. So you can see in 2019, almost 40%, 37% of all purchases in China were online purchases. Compare that to just 11 in US, right? So you can see that this is a much more digitally savvy, much more e-commerce oriented market. And that's how they're serving such a big and diverse population. You can see that these three giants, Alibaba, Jingdong, and Pinduoduo, are controlling 80% of the e-commerce market. It's kind of like an oligopoly situation. And actually, Chinese government recently has taken some steps to kind of control it, right? They said, this is a little bit like a monopoly and you shouldn't be doing this. So right now the stocks, depending on when you watch this video, but the value of Jingdong and Alibaba has actually decreased almost 10%, I think, recently because of these potential threats of breaking up this oligopoly. And I will talk about each of these companies in turn. Alibaba, you have probably heard of them because they have AliExpress. They're basically the largest player. They have B2B, business to business, B2C, business to consumer, and C2C, consumer to consumer. So they're kind of like eBay and Amazon all put together, and they are incredibly large and serve all sorts of markets. They have so many apps. They've moved into financing with Alipay, which I mentioned in another video. They have their finger in so many pies. They've invested in so many companies. It's hard to keep track of all the things that they are doing, including a lot of Internet of Things and data analysis. So they're really trying to be this innovative company doing something relatively normal, which is take an item from a person, promote it to another person, and take a percent if they buy it. Jingdong is kind of their biggest competitor, also known as JD. It has a cute logo of a puppy. And they are more focused on business to consumer, so they're kind of a little bit more niche. But they have built up a brand of being maybe more reputable in quality. And so some people prefer them when they're buying like branded items and things like that. And then Pinduoduo went the completely opposite way. It's actually a quite recent entrant. I think in the last 2 years it made a complete boom. Again, because it attacked that bottom of the pyramid market, which the big players were not serving. It said, okay, listen, you can buy a bag of potatoes for $1. That's what the other guys do. What I'm offering is I'm offering you half a truck, and then per bag it'll cost $0.50. But you have to find who will buy the rest of that half truck. And because they're selling so much, they can decrease their costs and they can basically sell wholesale to consumers. So they have applied the B2B approach to consumers, counting on them being entrepreneurial. And what has happened is this, as they call them in China, AIs, and shushus, these elderly people who are usually recently retired, are very active in their communities, they're quite social. They said, I want cheap potatoes, and I have 20 neighbors, and they also need potatoes. So they made these like social media groups. They post something and they say, hey, let's order potatoes. People apply, they order for them, the thing arrives, they distribute. And you can see Pinduoduo actually there is not doing much. It just says, here's an offer, and they let the consumer do the selling, distribution, and money collection. Like crazy, right? So they've offloaded a lot of it, but consumers find that interesting. When they're rewarded with low prices and good deals, people are willing to put an effort, plus it turns into like a social activity. You can buy something cheap for your family, for example, and you get to mingle with your neighbors when you're making these orders. So Pinduoduo here is a really interesting entrant. Alibaba and JD are fighting hard against it. They opened their own versions of it and are trying to divert some of the market share to them because Pinduoduo mostly ignored the large cities and just went into towns, they call it in China, second, third, fourth tier towns and smaller places. So really attacking a part that was underserved. So let's talk about the one-day delivery promise. Story time. This was about 2 years ago. I was at some kind of introduction to a new job. Even though I lived in China for a long time, they decided to present life in China to foreigners, right? And I was one of the experienced ones, but there were some people who were first time in China. And there was this one young man from United Kingdom, and he said, you know, I've heard about this e-commerce. How can I order? And the Chinese lady who was giving the presentation, she said, oh, you know, I love it. You know, you should really buy a lot of things online. It's really convenient. But order from Jingdong, from JD, not from Alibaba, because when you order from Alibaba, it can sometimes take 2 days. But from Jingdong, they deliver in 1 day. And I could see the look on my colleague, this British young man, and he was confused. He said, how do you mean 1 or 2 days? In the UK, any kind of delivery takes 5 or 2 weeks or something. Nothing that is instantly delivered. Not in China. In China, it's really like that. We're really spoiled with the speed. Sometimes it happens that I order a phone in the morning and it's in my house by that afternoon, couple of hours after I made the delivery. That is incredible amount of efficiency. And how did they get there? That's the next question. How did China get there? First thing is heavy competition. None of these monopolies can really relax. The market is big and intensely growing, as point number 2 says. So there is a lot of money to be made in the future, and everyone is looking for a way to cut down the giant and take his piece of the pie. And so even the big companies can never relax. They cannot charge huge profit margins. They cannot say, oh, well, you know, we don't have to innovate. No, they are in intense head-to-head fights on who can deliver even a couple of hours earlier with a bit better service. It really comes down to what we said about supply chains, right? Who can build a better supply chain? Interestingly, Alibaba mostly relied on subcontracting supply chains, so letting other companies do their deliveries for them, and that has kind of allowed them to focus on building the website and doing a good service, while letting other companies do the delivering part. And that's a pretty smart solution that they came up with. But then some other companies found out that maybe it's more efficient if they do the delivery. So there's really kind of innovation happening there, you know, month to month. Next, there are cheap factors of production. If you remember, in the very beginning we spoke about factors of production. In China they tend to be relatively cheap. There is a lot of land where you can build warehouses, especially outside of cities. The labor cost was not so high. It's getting higher every year, but still it's relatively fine that you can hire a lot of people to do the labor of transporting. Capital cost is quite cheap. China is the manufacturing capital of the world. That's where everything happens. So of course things are cheap there. And enterprise, the profits are kept relatively reasonable. You cannot be too greedy in such a competitive market. So all of that pushes things to be quite cheap and quite affordable, which then really makes this price competition severe and intense. Next, you have economies of scale. Because it's a large country with a very large market, you can really benefit from economies of scale, right? It doesn't pay off to make a system which does drone deliveries if your market is 100 people. But when your market is 1.3 billion people, you bet it pays off. And finally, and very importantly, government support. None of this is very beneficial if infrastructure is poor and if the government doesn't care about developing supply chains. Chinese government has really heavily invested in all transport infrastructure. There are many airports, very many ports developed in a very good way. There is a high-speed railway going north to south, east to west across the country, and branching. It's the longest high-speed railway in the world. And since recently, actually depends on when you're watching this, but since October 2020, there is now a fast train going all the way to Europe. Transporting a good to Europe used to take 4 weeks by ship, and now for a relatively competitive price, you can transport it in 2 weeks by train. You can imagine how big of a difference that is going to make, cutting the delivery time in half from Asia to Europe. And so this government support of developing, you know, highways, roads, really has built into the development of these giants of supply chain management. So let's take a look at something which even Taylor Swift has done, which is 11/11 Singles Day. This started, I believe, in 2009 as a kind of promotion. Like 1 is the number of a bachelor, like a single person, and so it used to be called Bachelor's Day, 11/11, and they used to give some discounts. And people thought that was quite interesting and quite funny, and it became quite popular, until now it is the biggest shopping day in the world. It's the biggest shopping event because so many people buy into it, and it's now becoming global, kind of like Black Friday, but grossing much more money than Black Friday ever did. Alibaba grossed $38.4 billion last year. This year almost doubled it to $74.1 billion, although they cheated a little bit. Last year it was 24 hours, this year it was like 4 days, so don't take this number just for granted, but it was definitely a bigger sale than last year. So the question is, how do you organize this? How do you organize shipping when in one day you sell 2.93 billion packages, right? What kind of beast of supply chain delivery and logistics you must have to get through 2.93 billion packages, right? It says here in 1 second, the busiest second on their website, they had over 500,000 parcels sold in 1 busy second. That's crazy. So, how do you do it? Well, besides hiring Taylor Swift to do your promotional advertisement to actually sell that much, you should hire over 400,000 temporary workers on top of 3 million workers that are already delivering. Now, these numbers look large, right? This is more than some countries. But you have to take it in context of 2.9 billion packages, right? Even with 3 million workers, that is still quite a lot of packages per worker, right? Almost 1,000. Each worker in the warehouse walks estimated 42 kilometers per day, carrying boxes from one part of the warehouse to another. Basically a marathon per day per worker. And you implement all sorts of innovations, AI, electric vehicles, robots, and such, which delivered about 30% faster than before when all combined. That was kind of the efficiency increase. Next, in preparation for it, they chartered 3,000 flights into China, delivering foreign goods that will be sold on 11/11, and 700 flights out of China. With over 10,000 delivery lockers, you can see them on this picture, so the delivery man can leave it there and you can come and pick it up. That way saving quite a lot of time to the delivery person and saving you some cost. And using predictive technologies. So if you can tell, in this compound, a lot of people ordered this phone. Not everyone will get it, but a lot of people will. So you put kind of 80% of that quantity, for example, in a warehouse really nearby, ready for that day. Day starts, people buy, you have the phone meters away, right? That's kind of the predictive technologies we're talking about here. It's spooky and scary, but it's what it is. Here are the results. JD has actually delivered 93% of all its parcels within the next day after the sale. This to me is insane. This delivery speed is really unrivaled. Alibaba didn't publish these numbers, but within a couple of days, everything was done. It's really an incredible wave of sales, wave of deliveries, and then gone. One JD customer received the lipstick she ordered in 6 minutes after she placed the order, which just goes to tell how good their predictive algorithm is and how good their delivery is. So imagine, like, you press order and 6 minutes later, you don't even have enough time to make yourself dinner, knock on the door, it's delivered. Crazy, right? In Alibaba, they had a different story of 11 minutes to deliver a parcel of some, I think, mosquito repellent or something like that in Sichuan. And another thing is, one of the problems of all the last years was this problem you can see in the picture here. It's cardboard. So much cardboard trash. And don't get me wrong, China is really good at recycling cardboard. There was a kind of a informal study done by some Westerners in Shanghai, and I had a chance to talk to them. And they put a little tracker in a couple of pieces of cardboard, and they threw them in the trash. And within 2 days, some of them have already been turned into new boxes, goods put into them, and they were shipped back outside. So imagine that, from the trash can to new use in 2 days. Fascinating, really, really fascinating. But still, not all trash can be recycled, not all trash ends up recycled. And so this year, Alibaba and JD really went to be more biodegradable in their packaging, more eco-friendly, so that this doesn't turn into a disaster, having these kind of huge spendings every year. So, we're now at the conclusion. Future of supply chain management is a mixture of high and low level technology innovation, right? We said, how do you deliver it? Well, you use AI and digital, data analysis and predictive technologies and hubs and corridors, and you just hire a lot of workers. And, that's really high and low tech. Robots do the thinking and the stuff, but someone still needs to knock on that door and deliver the package. It is this supply chain management then is somewhat trickled down, right? It does hire these workers who need it the most, the low-skilled workers. But at some point, automation might become an issue. Right now, it's just not profitable to replace a worker with a robot because robots can't reliably climb stairs, recognize buildings, and people prefer communicating with people for the most part, not always. But in the future, technology is getting cheaper, labor is getting more expensive, and at one point, supply chain management might start stealing jobs instead of giving new ones to these low-skilled workers. Globalization, as I said, it's unstoppable, and it'll drive supply chain management to its limits. We will not want less of anything. We just want more, cheaper, more, cheaper. So in the future, you'll see supply chain really become a driving force of innovation and powered by this globalization that is happening. And if I had to predict, even though I don't do that business, if I were in the business of predicting, I would say the big breaks, the really big cost savers in the next couple of years will be AI, Internet of Things, and other really advanced algorithms that can do some predictions, that can do some saving time, saving cost that we cannot even think of with our human and monkey brains that we have. So really keep an eye out on these new technologies and how they will revolutionize supply chain management. And keep an eye out on China. They really are, I hope as you have seen through my presentation today, at the cutting edge of supply chain management. And even if now different countries are threatening, oh, we will move supply chain management, the best trained labor for all of Asia is still there, and that's not going anywhere. They're maybe gonna move to Vietnam to live there, but the skills are still right now the most developed in China. So keep an eye on China and see how they innovate. You may want to replicate that in your own countries. Thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and reach out to me with any questions.